Now, Rishi Sunak has suffered a rebellion by 60 of his backbenchers this evening over his bill to send asylum seekers to Rwanda. The rebels included a parliamentary aide and 2 deputy chairmen of the Conservative Party who also resigned. They were trying to amend the bill to block migrants from using international human rights laws to prevent their deportation. They didn't succeed because the opposition joined with the government vote to vote down their changes. Well, our political editor Gary Gibbon is with me. Gary, what does it mean?
Well, it's at the higher end of expectations for this particular rebellion. It's not good for the Prime Minister's authority. I'm told he was witnessed in the lobbies of people voting, Conservative MPs voting with him. He was witnessed thanking them for voting him. Not a good look. But everything really comes down to third reading, the vote on the totality of the bill. You don't lose those votes and linger long. Your authority disappears. Do the Tory rebels actually have the numbers and the appetite for a defeat like that at the end of tomorrow's voting, when that third reading vote will come along? On the numbers, 58 Tory MPs plus 2 who've become independents were Tories. Well, yes, they could do it on those numbers, but there were only 26 Tory MPs willing to abstain on the second reading, a similar sort of moment, you might think. And when I asked one of those who is actually ready to vote against the government come the third reading, what he thought were the chances of having enough people alongside him, he said, I think we might get 20 on a really good day, maybe we'd get some more abstentions, but, he said, they'll all ask me, what next? And by that he meant, what would be the implications for Rishi Sunak? And what he meant there was his premiership wouldn't survive. How many Tory MPs right now have the appetite for that? I asked this former minister about that, and he said, well, if not now, it's coming. So you get a sense tonight that Rishi Sunak is probably, by the end of tomorrow, out of this wood, but not all the woods. The accommodation in Rwanda has still not been used. No planes have set off. Rishi Sunak's critics on the right of his party insisted only their hardening of his bill would make mass deportations possible. And this morning, Boris Johnson backed their cause, tweeting that the right course is to adopt the Tory rights amendments. After Cabinet met this morning, the government announced a sweetener to Tory rebels, extra judges to fast-track Rwanda migrant appeals. It didn't impress the rebels, and the coverage alarmed the most senior judge in England and Wales.
I'm afraid that this headline draws matters of judicial responsibility into the political arena. To be absolutely clear, matters of deployment of judges, the allocation of work for judges, and the use of courtrooms is exclusively a matter for the judiciary.
The recent briefings that seem to come from the government, that they're expecting a lot of cases under their law, and they're going to provide a lot more judges to do it. Aren't they telling us that it isn't going to work?
That's right.
Yeah. I'm afraid to say that that does appear to be the inevitable inference to be drawn from the statements that have been made.
At the Channel today, there were no recorded attempts on the 20-mile crossing by small boats. The Prime Minister finds his attempt to deter them in the future goes almost too far for one wing of his party and not far enough for another.
The only countries in the world that have fixed this problem, latterly Australia and Greece, have been willing to take the most robust action. Are we? Well, I am.
If amendments that are designed to make this bill even less compliant with the rule of law are accepted, that causes me and a number of other colleagues a huge problem. We cannot support the bill.
The right of the party is saying, if you don't give us what we want, Prime Minister, we're going to try and bring your bill down. You, from the other section of the party, are saying the same thing. What does that tell us about the health of this party?
Well, no, look, I think that it's right to have a proper debate about one of the greatest challenges. Well, it is.
Threatening the Prime Minister,
well, it's not
putting him between a rock and a hard place.
The language of threats is not really part of this. You know, this is
sure?
an unprecedented. Yeah, well, I'm absolutely sure.
One thing that you and I both agree on, we should be so proud of our country. We should shout about it all the time.
I always say this, Prime Minister, this country of ours is a gift to the world.
Lee Anderson, seen here a fortnight ago with Rishi Sunak, was one of 2 party deputy chairmen who defied the Prime Minister and resigned before they were sacked. This parliamentary aide also rebelled and lost their job.
on this issue, I'm going to turn my fire briefly and in a very friendly way on the Prime Minister. He should get a move on with this.
Rishi Sunak's calculating things could look a lot better for him when it comes to the critical vote on the whole bill tomorrow, the third reading.
The ayes to the right, 68. The noes to the left, 529.
Although the rebels on the right mustered 60 Tory MPs tonight, plus 2 former Tories and 8 DUP MPs for their amendments, Rishi Sunak's gambling will muster nothing like that number for the big vote tomorrow. What's your message to him if he thinks he can call your bluff?
Well, what I would say is that there are 65 colleagues who have signed the amendments that we're considering today.
They could all burn off very quickly, though, couldn't they, on the third reading?
Possibly they will, but, you know, frankly, what we're not doing is seeking to hold a gun to anybody's head.
The gun analogy, I mean, some people would say your gun's not loaded, because you can't actually bring it down at third reading. You haven't got the support for that.
Well, it's almost tempting to refer you to the line in Dirty Harry. Do you feel lucky?
Oh, I know that they risk looking like the sheriff in Blazing Saddles if they're not careful. Don't get to me or I'll blow my own brains out. I really don't think that sort of approach is helpful.
This evening has seen a coordinated show of defiance by the Tory right, a challenge to Rishi Sunak's authority, but his allies say it's survivable as long as the bill itself survives tomorrow's vote.
Gary Gibbon reporting there. Well, joining me now is one of the MPs who backed these amendments, Jacob Rees-Mogg. Thanks very much for joining us this evening.
Thank you.
Obviously an enormous majority for the government. Are you viewing this as a victory or a defeat this evening?
Well, it was a good number who voted in favour of the amendments. And the last time, pretty much, I was a teller, I think, was on the Leveson inquiry, and there were 530 votes against, and this time there are only 529, so it's a slow improvement.
But the truth is, what does this actually mean? Very little.
No, it's important because it shows what the support is within the Parliamentary Conservative Party for going further. But crucially, there was an opinion poll yesterday that showed that almost every parliamentary seat wants tougher migration controls and wants the bill toughened up in the way that we were advocating. And the reason I mentioned Leveson is that I think, as with Leveson, the 529, that time 530, who voted against tightening up the bill are out of touch with the mood of the British people.
But the point is these amendments don't go through, so you change nothing.
You change something. The government has been indicating how it would approach Rule 39 instructions coming from the European Court. There's been an evolution in its policy in that way. So what happens in the House of Commons doesn't always change the law on that day, but it certainly has an important political effect.
I mean, you could change it tomorrow, couldn't you? Well, if you got enough to vote against the third reading of this bill, then things would change quite dramatically.
Well, voting against the overall bill is a different matter, because then you lose all the good bits of the bill as well as having an opportunity to try again.
So you won't be voting against
Well, we'll have
tomorrow.
to wait and see till tomorrow. We should be doing the interview after that, but let tomorrow wait upon tomorrow.
But the truth is that what matters tomorrow matters more than the 68 people who backed this amendment today, doesn't it, in truth?
Well, the end of a parliamentary process is always as important as the beginning of it, isn't it? That must be true, and that as a parliamentary process works through, you need to look at it in its totality, and then the bill will go, if it passes third reading of the House of Lords, and maybe change there. So politics is always an evolving process.
But it's all about putting pressure on Mr. Sunak to change this bill. I mean, you saw 2 resignations today, Lee Anderson, Brendan Clark-Smith. Did they resign before they were sacked?
Well, who knows? You'll have to ask the Chief Whip that. But in a way, it doesn't really matter. That collective responsibility arguably applies to Vice Chairman of the Conservative Party or Deputy Chairman, and they have decided that it's more important for them to back these amendments, and I think that was a perfectly reasonable thing for them to do.
Lee Anderson particularly, seen as a real ally of the Prime Minister on occasion, certainly a very vocal voice.
Lee Anderson is a powerful political voice who connects with voters. You see, what worries me about today is that the country at large would have supported the amendments. And ultimately politicians have to be in touch with the people who send us here.
But if only 68 people support the amendments, if it doesn't actually change anything, what is the game plan here for people like you?
What we're doing is encouraging the government to move in the right direction. The government already has moved a long way in the right direction. So although this bill may not be perfect, it's a long way away from where we would have been a couple of years ago.
But it's entirely possible that the bill goes through tomorrow, doesn't it? Unless people
of course it's possible
who voted for the amendment today have the courage or the ambition or the bravery, however you would put it, to vote against the bill itself.
I mean, that's a different question, because the bill has bits in it that are excellent. It's got a notwithstanding clause, it's got clarity about the safety of Rwanda, it has effectively reversed the judgment of the Supreme Court. This is a proper constitutional thing for Parliament to do, and a powerful thing for Parliament to do.
So Jacob, if I could hold you for one moment. Miriam Cates has thankfully joined us.
Hand you over to Miriam, because I can now go and do GB News, so thank you very much.
Well, you can go without telling me how you're going to vote tomorrow. Miriam Cates, Sir Jacob Rees-Mogg said that, you know, this does bring about significant change. I don't understand how. How does it if the amendments don't pass?
Well, it shows the strength of feeling, I think, in favour of tightening up the bill. We can sign amendments, we can talk about what we want, but until we get those numbers on the paper, the numbers through the lobby, then it's not clear to the government how much feeling there is.
And what do the numbers tell you tonight?
Well, the numbers tell us that there's very strong support for tightening up the bill. I think the debate was very interesting as well, the number of people that spoke in favour of this bill actually working, and that's what we want to achieve. We want the bill to work. We want to create an effective deterrent so that people smuggling gangs across the world know that anyone who arrives on our shore illegally will be swiftly detained and deported. That's the point of the bill. It currently has loopholes, that's why we're trying to amend it.
So tell me, those amendments don't go through today. How does today practically change this bill?
Well, we very much hope that the government will now take the strength of feeling very seriously. We have been negotiating with the government in good faith, but as we all know, they haven't yet put forward their own amendment or accepted ours. We hope that will change over the next 24 hours now that the numbers are apparent. And you will have seen some very high-profile names in that lobby. Lee Anderson and Brendan Clark-Smith have just resigned from their positions in order to vote
and to put more pressure on Rishi Sunak?
Well, exactly. This is all about pressure. It's all about numbers, isn't it? We want the bill to work. We're keen for these amendments to go forward. We've got to show the government with strength of numbers that there's feeling.
But as you know about the numbers, it's very easy to rebel against amendments that you know were never going to be passed. So tomorrow is key. So Jacob Rees-Mogg wouldn't tell me that he would vote against the bill tomorrow, will you? You have said today that you're minded.
I would be prepared. No, I haven't said that. I said I would be prepared to. But 24 hours is a long time in politics. We've got another full day of debate tomorrow. There will be more amendments voted on tomorrow, not just our amendments, amendments from the opposition, amendments from the government, potentially, we don't know yet. So it's a long time. But yes, I would in theory be prepared to, but what I really want is for the government to tighten up this bill. We all want the same thing here, which is it to work. It's far too risky at this late stage in the Parliament to put forward a bill that could get caught up in the courts for months and months.
Exactly. Is that a polite threat to Mr Sunak? You don't want this to fail for him?
Well, nobody wants it to fail. The Prime Minister doesn't want it to fail. He has said he will do whatever it takes to stop the boats, and that's what we need to do.
So what do you think will happen, could happen practically in the next 24 hours? Are you talking about them rewriting the bill, bringing it back in weeks, months' time?
So one possibility is that the government could bring forward a new bill. I mean, that would be unusual, but it's not unprecedented, and it could be done. And there was some discussion about that actually in the debate in the chamber today. So that could be done. That is a possibility. Or the government can tighten up this bill in the way that we've outlined. And the government gave us some fairly clear instructions before Christmas, which is that if we could come forward with some amendments that had a respectable legal argument, they would consider them. These amendments do have a respectable legal argument. We've now given them the numbers to show that they must consider them.
The Prime Minister has said today that he will put forward 150 judges, give them extra sitting time at weekends and the evenings to make sure these cases, any appeals, are dealt with quickly. Why wasn't that enough for you?
Because the government said that the bill as it stands will not permit individual appeals, because they've said it's so tight there'll be very few. So if they're bringing forward 150 new judges, surely it just implies that they accept there will be lots of individual challenges, which is exactly what we're warning.
And just briefly, I mean, is there a danger that the public watching this won't be able to necessarily engage with the slightly arcane language of complicated amendments? They will just look at this and say, ahead of a general election, this is a party once again split, divided, not looking like the next party of government?
Well, I think the party was the most divided it had ever been in June 2019, and we all know what happened in December 2019. But I think there was a very interesting poll published last night in the Telegraph that showed that the most preferred option amongst voters in almost all constituencies in the country was, to solve this problem, was swift detention and removal. That was the most preferred option.
If you don't get that right, or if that doesn't happen quickly.
If it doesn't happen, we won't have a deterrent, and then the bill will have failed. And that's why we're so keen to tighten it up, because we want the bill to work.
Miriam Cates, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.